Pokemon Legends Z-A is almost upon us, and although I'm not a psychic type, I do have one functioning eye, and based on what I've seen so far, I'd like to make some predictions. Not quite 3 hopes, more like 3 brave fears. Before I give my own thoughts, I'm sure you have some thoughts of your own, such as, Cheese, why do you look like a Concord character? All will be revealed in due time. Let's just say that I wouldn't expect you to understand hot French fashion. Quick disclaimer that I am going into Legends ZA with an incredibly negative bias, and that bias is based on having actually played modern Switch Pokemon games, along with other games to actually compare them to. For my bite-sized thoughts on the 2 Pokemon titles most closely related to Legends Z-A, I'd consider Pokemon Legends Arceus the best Pokemon game ever made if it was released in 2002 for the GameCube. As a modern Switch release, I'd probably give it a 2 out of 10. And for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, in the context of it being a flagship release for the most profitable franchise on Earth, it's probably the worst game I've ever played in my life. So although I'm fully expecting Legends Z-A to be bad, it's a matter of degrees. There's a significant difference between a case of the sniffles and the plague. I would actually consider it a victory if Z-A ended up being as bad as, let's say, lupus. These are all predictions. I have not played the game myself yet, and I also have not seen any of the naughty leaks. I don't necessarily want to cast Doom Desire. I'm sort of hoping that I'm gonna be wrong on some of these predictions. So after Legends Z-A releases, feel free to revisit this video and let me know exactly how wrong my predictions were, and I'll gladly eat Murkrow. I want to get my most substantial criticism out of the way first, and that would be the gameplay. Legends Z-A is a radical step in the right direction for Pokemon, in that it is no longer turn-based, it is now in an action RPG cooldown-based system, very similar to a system we often see in MMORPGs, or in the single-player space, the Xenoblade Chronicles games. It's not for everyone, but I actually love cooldown-based hotkey combat. It's actually my favorite. And to back it up, here are the DPS logs from my last World of Warcraft patchwork kill. Number 1, Rutger the Rogue, that's me. I pressed 5 buttons. Because I have a ton of experience with this style of combat, I am very, very worried by the gameplay that has been revealed so far. I'm not necessarily worried about what we see, it's more what we don't see. Where's the auto attack? In all of these cooldown-based combat systems, your character should always be doing something. If you're a melee character, you should always be auto-attacking, perhaps in a certain rhythm that you need to combo with your cooldowns. And if you're a caster, you should always be casting at least some sort of filler spell. Maybe Shadow Bolt, maybe Frost Bolt, Fire Bolt, Lightning Bolt. You could say that the bolts keep the entire system together. There was a hotkey combat MMO that actually didn't have auto-attack. It was called Final Fantasy XIV. No, not that one with the generous free trial that everyone loved. Final Fantasy XIV 1.0. The one that was so bad the developers had to issue a public apology and then destroy the game in-universe so they could rebuild it. That game didn't have auto-attack. I can already tell that the combat of Legends Z-A is going to drive me absolutely bonkers. If you've ever played one of these cooldown-based MMOs, you'll know that positioning can be kind of finicky, even when you are the one directly controlling your positioning, leading up to your backslash or your slit edge. In the revealed Legends Z-A gameplay, you can see that your Pokemon will attempt to execute a move, then go back to you, then for the next move go to the enemy, then back to you, then to the enemy, then back to you, and there's this constant yo-yoing that looks really chaotic and really imprecise and really amateur, honestly. How in the world are you actually going to position correctly when you're not even the one controlling the position. And I'm sure it'll work even better in multiplayer when accounting for lag. I'm also very worried about megas being over-centralizing. We've seen that there are boss battles against rogue mega evolutions, and that as you damage them, they drop mega goo or orbs that you can then suck up with your own Pokemon to mega evolve yourself and then fight on equal terms. But what if your Pokemon doesn't have a mega evolution? Can they just not participate in the boss battles? The most climactic parts of the gameplay? It kind of reminds me of a major issue with Fire Emblem 9 Path of Radiance, which has an excellent cast, arguably the best, but for the final boss battle of the game, 99% of characters are useless because the final boss has literal plot armor that only the main character can pierce with their Super Shonen sword. There's a very simple solution to this, and it's one that's already been implemented in a different Pokemon game, Pokken. Pokken is a fighting game, which means there's a meter you can charge, and in Pokken, this is called the burst gauge. Once your Pokemon has filled their burst gauge, if they have a Mega, they can then Mega and they get a new, stronger moveset for the duration of the burst. But the Mega Evolution part is mostly cosmetic. There are Pokemon in Pokken that don't have a Mega, such as Machamp, and they still have a burst gauge. It's just that when it's full, they don't Mega, they have some different form of visual and gameplay power-up. In Machamp's case, he turns into Alex Jones and just gets kind of red. For story, I obviously can't condemn it without actually experiencing it, but expectations are low, which is why I've basically just decided to make my own side story as a backup. And I can tell you this, I probably put more effort into it than Gamefreak did. Yes, I did have to actually go out in public looking like this, but I can't actually see the people mocking me, so really I'm not that bothered by it. Was it worth it? Please subscribe. I do think it's reasonable to expect the same subterranean level of quality in terms of presentation that we've seen since the leap to the Switch. So that means barely any animations and, of course, no voice acting. This is where I should mention that Fire Emblem The Last Promise, a ROM hack made by a 14-year-old kid in his bedroom, somehow managed to incorporate voice acting into a Game Boy Advance fan game.
Everything I feel is in this sword.
Recording this line at 2 a.m., making sure not to wake anybody up. Very calm.
Then here I come.
Are they the same guy?
Now it sounds like garbled ass, but if a 14-year-old kid can add voice acting recorded on his 2008 flip phone, I think 2025 Gamefreak can maybe step up to the plate here. And lastly, we would be remiss if we didn't mention visuals and performance. I saw this image, and my initial thought was, oh wow, Spider-Man really doesn't look out of place in Legend Z-A. Only to then, to my horror, realize that they didn't add Spider-Man to Lumiose. They added Pokemon to Spider-Man 2 from 2004 on the PS2. And they fit in perfectly. It does get mentioned a lot, but it's important, so it warrants mentioning again. I can't believe how bad the buildings look for a game set in a city. How did they think they could get away with 2D textures for balconies instead of models? I wish I could just pull a Gamefreak and replace myself talking with a 2D PNG. It'd be a whole lot easier than setting all this crap up. The city setting itself is also a horrible match for the Pokemon series. Cities in Pokemon are basically where everything except the gameplay happens. You do almost all of the actual Pokemon gameplay that you know and love in between the cities. On the routes is where you catch Pokemon and battle youngsters who love shorts. When you reach a city, that's basically your rest and recovery time. You can heal your team, buy some items, and then set out for the next part of the adventure before going back to the city because you forgot your employee. Because it wouldn't really make sense for Pokemon to just be running amok in the streets, the only real gameplay that happened in Pokemon cities was confined to dungeons. Either mini dungeons like gyms, or actual full-scale dungeons like Silphco, back when they actually had buildings you could enter. I'd say it would be crazy to not expect to be able to enter the buildings in a city, but I played Scarlet and Violet, and you couldn't go into buildings there, so why would things be any different here? In all of the footage that has been revealed so far, every environment looks the same. It's either an alley or a park. That's it. And Gamefreak is not the only company that has been guilty of shackling their game to a city setting. Dragon Age 2 did it with the city of Kirkwall, and it was one of the most hated aspects of the game. It led to one of the only enemy encounter types being just roving thugs. Because how else are you gonna have random enemies in a city? The only game with a restricted city setting that I actually enjoyed was Final Fantasy VII Remake. And that was a very linear game that was essentially a high-paced guided tour through all of the biomes that Midgar had to offer. Somehow, I don't think Lumio City is gonna live up to those standards. For performance, ever since the Switch 2 was revealed, all of the gameplay we've been officially shown has been on Switch 2. Which makes sense. Why wouldn't they want to show off the version that performs better? But they are selling the game for Switch 1, so I think it's perfectly fair to expect that the Switch 1 version also function. Which it won't. Lag in Scarlet and Violet didn't really change the gameplay, it just made me feel like I was playing a freshman college design project. Since the battles in Legend Z-A are in real time, lag and frame drops are gonna be added jank on top of the mountain of jank that already exists. I myself will be playing the game on Switch 1 for a couple of reasons. The first is that when the game crashes by yourself, it's kind of sad, but when it crashes with an audience, it's kind of funny. But of course, the main reason I'll be playing it on Switch 1 is because I don't have a Switch 2, and more importantly, I can't get a Switch 2. Now, I'm lucky enough to say that it's not a financial issue. Thanks to these lovely Patreons you see on screen behind me. Thank you to the Patreons for helping fund props like the ones I'm wearing now. The issue is that you're an English speaker, and so am I, but I live in Japan, where the only widely available Switch 2 models are actually region-locked to Japanese only. If I want what they call a multi-language capable Switch, I have to actually enter an official online lottery, which I can't do because it requires a whole list of requirements, including about a year of Nintendo Online subscription. They're doing this to combat scalpers, and the cherry on top of this poop sundae is that the multilingual Switch 2 is about $200 more expensive than the Japanese-only Switch 2. I'm sorry, but it feels so slimy to have to ponyta up an additional $200 just to be able to remove a software lock on the language settings. So I'm simply not going to purchase a Switch 2 until such time in the future that the purchase would be justifiable both as a tax write-off and as a tool that I can use to help sustain my lifestyle as a content creator, focusing on Pokemon and Fire Emblem. I love video games!